had 2 hotels with umpteen staff and all the rest of it, until I finally sold a lot of them. But, and became a farmer. Became a farmer, if you can call it a farmer. Yes, got a few fields. So I'm a farmer. But that's the way it was. I was in the Air Force and I did it because there was a war on, and that is what we had to do.
But did you fly?
Yes. Sorry?
Did you fly in the war? Did you actually fly in the war?
Oh yes.
What is?
Yes. I joined a squadron of Halifaxes, and Halifaxes then, they'd given up their bombing role to the Lancasters, and we had these big panniers underneath. We could carry troops and guns, we could carry a jeep underneath, and we towed gliders with sort of 25 troops sitting in them. And that was quite something, because one day we had to do a mass drop, and people came in with Sterlings from all around the town, everywhere, towing things, and we were given instruction. You know, you flew at 500 feet, and then the pilot, which was me, gave the instruction to cast off or whatever it was, and the glider pilot would then drop the rope and swing up as high as we could go to get a bit of height, and we would get out of the way as hard as we could go, and they would drop down behind us with all their troops in. Unfortunately, I gave him the order to cast off, and he pulled up, and he hadn't cast off. And suddenly I found myself going down towards the earth, and I literally put my feet up onto the instrument panel in front of me, and heaved back on the stick, and pulled the plane up a bit, because otherwise we'd have gone straight in. And I just told my rear gunner to cast him off. I said, get rid of him quickly. And he's fine. I don't know what happened to him. But I flew back to Tarrant, which is my home station. But then, you see, the war finished, and we were actually, although we were in Halifaxes, we were being run by Fighter Command, which sounded odd, but we were run by Fighter Command, and I did things like going to Germany and picking up ammunition that had been used and brought back. And one trip to Germany, this is true, one trip to Germany, we landed, we were going to pick up all these big cases of ammunition, and a flight lieutenant came up to me. I was a warrant officer by this time. A flight lieutenant came up to me and he said, "Are you flying these Halifaxes?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Have you got those panniers and things underneath?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I've got a Mercedes at the end of the runway." He said, "Could you pick it up and drop it when you get home at the end of your runway, and I'll pick it up later?" And I said, "No, I'm terribly sorry, I don't do that." But that's a fact. And I tell you another funny thing that happened too. It was when I was, we converted, you see, onto twin engine with the Oxfords, and then onto Wellington 10s. And on Wellington 10s, we were stationed at a place, there was in Shropshire, not far from Shrewsbury, there was the headquarters, which was WEM, W-E-M, that was one airport, and then there was Sleap, a few miles away, S-L-E-A-P, where I was stationed with Wellingtons, and then there was Shawbury, which made a sort of ring of three place, which was a navigational training place. And I went up with an instructor on the Wellington 10, and we did things like going to the Scilly Isles and back via Bournemouth and to land at night. So we get out towards the Scilly Isles, and I said to the instructor, because I was flying and he was sitting by the side of me, he was a flying officer, I said to him, "Oh, look, there, my starboard engine isn't very good." I said, "The oil pressure's gone down." He said, "That's all right." He said, "Cut the engine and he said, we'll turn round and go back to base. He said, you turn round and keep that dead engine on the outside so that you swing round that way. And he said, you can fly perfectly well on one engine. So we do that, and we are flying perfectly well on one engine back to Slape. As we approached Slape, he said, I'd better take over and land, he said, because they're landing on one engine. And so I said, all right. So we swapped places, and we could see the ring of lights all the way around the airfield. And he said he was on the downwind leg, and they said, well, land straight ahead on runway something or other. And he landed, and we taxied down the runway at speed, and went into a ditch. Dropped into a ditch. And he said, what the hell was that? I said, well, it was a ditch. He said, well, where did they put a ditch at the end of this runway? I said, I have no idea. With that, all the lights went out everywhere. And he said, now they put the lights out on us. What do they think they're doing? This was with a few expletives, of course. And then there was a row between the...
Don't forget Falcon Field.
There was a row with the flight engineer and wireless operator as to who was going to fire the Very pistol. Anyway, the flight engineer said that it was his job, so he opened the canopy on the flies this Very light, and a jeep comes round the edge, and my pilot looked out of the cockpit and said, what the hell do you think you were doing, put all the lights out? And this chap in the jeep said, well, what the hell do you think you were doing landing here? It's Shawbury. He said, oh, I thought we were landing at Slape. He said, well, you've landed at Shawbury instead. And we'd landed at the wrong airfield. It wasn't anything to do with me. I just kept here. I was only the passenger. But it was quite interesting. I don't know what happened to him afterwards.
I'm just going to give these gentlemen a bit of a break, because I think we're sort of getting them to talk endlessly, which is wonderful. But just to give them a little bit of rest from our interrogation, I'm going to ask George if he would like to come and talk.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm nowhere near as interesting or exciting, so if anyone wants to get a cup of tea or go to the toilet, now's the time. I don't know where to start speaking after these gentlemen. I'll start with a little bit about myself and my Air Force career. I've been in the Air Force 16 years now. I've flown a multitude of types. Most of my combat experience is in Afghanistan. I've also done a little bit of time in Iraq, Libya and Somalia, but nothing that compares to what went wrong in World War II. As I say, I joined the Air Force in 2005, spent about a year in officer training, so where you learn to become an officer and get rank on your shoulder. My journey through flying training started with about a year of what we call elementary flying training nowadays, which is where you fly a little airplane called a glob tutor, a piston engine, 2 seats side by side, made out of fiberglass. From there I went to fly an aircraft called the Tucano, which is a fighter lead-in trainer, and I'll come back to that later because that's what I instructed on for my instructional tour. And the Tucano was a fantastic aircraft, 1,000 horsepower engine, weighed about 3 tons, so not too dissimilar from a Spitfire, and it was made of aluminium, metal construction, so if you tapped it on the wing it made a satisfying clunk, whereas on the chute if you tapped that on the wing you'd probably stick your finger through it. I spent about a year flying the Tucano, about 120 hours or so, and that was at a base called RAF Museum up in Yorkshire, which was a World War II Halifax base, so I've got a lot of interest in Halifax pilots. From Linton News, I also ventured overseas for part of my flying training. I went to fly the Hawk T1, which is a jet fighter trainer. Will go supersonic in a dive, very sleek aircraft. And that was overseas. That was in a place called Anglesey, which is just off the coast of North Wales. And I think I'm allowed to take the piss out of Welsh because I'm quarter Welsh myself. But if you go to Anglesey, it's like going to a different country. I'd like to say I've got fond memories of Anglesey. I haven't. I remember one Remembrance Sunday. We all had to do a church parade in Bangor, just on the mainland, and we had the RAF band, marching band, come to for the march past into town, and we were marching through a bit of a council estate on the edge of Bangor, and the band got egged by some youths, threw an egg at the band, and it was an absolutely miraculous sight to see the band marching along, playing their tune, suddenly start speeding up and playing a little bit faster as they started jogging off down the street. Now, I should say of my time in flying training that I wasn't very good. So much so that after 30 hours on the Hawk jet training, I was what we called chopped, or perhaps in your day, eliminated, which sounds very sinister, and in my case meant that I couldn't go on and fly fighter jets. However, by this point, I'd been in the Air Force three or so years. The Air Force had spent lots of money training me to fly, so they decided that, well, if you're not cut out for fighter jets, we might be able to send you out to fly something less demanding. So I was what we call restreamed and sent to fly transport aircraft. And normally, from the stage of flying training that I was in at that point, flying the Hawk, it would take you about another 2 years to get combat ready on a frontline fighter aircraft. For myself, I was pulled off of fast jet training in, let's see, it would have been February of 2009, and sent to the multi-engine, the transport flying training school at Cranwell. And 6 months later, I was flying reconnaissance missions in an aircraft called the Shadow over Afghanistan, whilst all my course mates, who were still in fast jet training, were still in the training system. So, bizarrely, in spite of failing flying traiing, I ended up flying missions in Afghanistan sooner than any of my other colleagues. And an irony of this is in the Royal Air Force, you get given what's called flying pay if you're a fully qualified frontline pilot. Now, all my colleagues who were successful in their flying training, still at RAF Valley, they weren't on flying pay yet, whereas myself, who'd failed because I'd gone to the front line faster, was getting paid more. And it's brilliant, because not only do you get paid flying pay, but it goes up in an increment each year. So the fact that I got flying pay sooner meant I got more seniority as well. So to this day, I still get paid more than my classmates who were successful while I wasn't. As I said, most of my combat experience was in Afghanistan. After flying reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan, I was sent to fly an aircraft called the C-130 Hercules. Some of you may be familiar with it. Spent 5 years there. And after 5 years, they decided, well, you're quite an experienced pilot now, so we ought to try making an instructor out of you. And I was sent back to my old unit at RAF Linton News, flying the Tucano as an instructor. Now, an interesting side note is the man who chopped me on the Hawk, through my withdrawal flight in the Hawk, was now the commandant of the Central Flying School when I came back to be an instructor. And we were having our instructor ground school, day one of ground school, and the commandant walks in to welcome you back to the Central Flying School. And he came around the room and met everyone and said, George Buddlepan, is it nice to meet you? And I was like, nice to meet you, you asshole. You don't even remember me. Now, I should say, I believe that before COVID there was a plan that this event might have been held in Arizona this year. And the reviewing officer was going to be a man who's now the director of flying training, who was also the commandant of CFS in this story and was the man who chopped me. So I'm delighted to say that you've been upgraded from having a senior officer to having a real life pilot. Now I must say, none of my stories even compare with the tales that these gentlemen can tell, but one thing that does resonate with me is I've been in the Air Force for 16 years now, and I've been on many courses in my time, been based at many different stations all around the world, and the one group of people who I still get together with each year, who we still have a bit of a reunion, for want of better words, is the group of people who are on my basic flying training course. And I'm not entirely sure why it's that group. It's not the group I was on officer training with, it's not the group I did my first combat tour with, it's the guys from my basic flying training course, so a group of 11 of us. And I think that of all the training you can do in the military, basic flying training is the one that develops you the most. It's the one that really turns you from, in my case, an 18-year-old boy into a man. It's the most formative phase of your development. And I remember when I was at Linton, I had the privilege of being a course commander and being in charge of a course of students going through from start to finish. And at the graduation, I said to them that for the rest of your lives, when you meet someone in the street, or you get introduced to your girlfriend's parents, or whatnot, or you just meet someone in the bar and they ask you, well, what do you do? You're going to say that you're a pilot, first and foremost. And that starts, you start saying that from that stage of flying training. That's when you first identify as a pilot. And it's, I really feel for Keith here that you didn't get awarded your wings at the end of your training in America. Hopefully at some point we may be able to do something about that, to put that right. So yeah, that's a bit of my background and my story. I'm afraid it doesn't compare to these gentlemen. Is there, just out of curiosity, is there anyone in the audience that wants to, I don't know, compare how flying training is today with how it was 80 years ago, or any other questions on kind of fields?
What do you think about it, George? When you hear what these gentlemen have been saying about how they were flying, Vernon just being chucked, chuck your stuff in this plane and just fly over there, and did you have that kind of experience, or was it much more?
I'm pleased to say the flying training system today is a lot more mature, and so flying accidents, or certainly fatal accidents in flying training nowadays, thankfully, are virtually unheard of. They do still happen occasionally, but as I say, I've been in the Air Force 16 years, and I can probably count, and I know hundreds, if not probably over 1,000 other pilots and aircrew, and I can probably count on one hand the numbers that have been lost in accidents or in combat for that matter. And another interesting point is that people often assume that the most dangerous stage of a military pilot's career will be when they're flying in combat in a war zone or on the front line. However, the statistics, certainly from the end of the Second World War, and this bears true to today in fact, is that the most dangerous, statistically, per flying hour phase of a pilot's career will be the early days when they're going through flying training. I remember in my case, when I was going through advanced jet training at Valley, there was a particular syllabus sortie on the course. It was trip number 20, where you went off to practice flapless circuits in the Hawk for the first time. So training if you'd had a hydraulics failure and you couldn't lower your flaps for landing. Now this was especially dangerous because it meant you had to land much faster, kind of touchdown speed over 150 miles an hour, and it meant the aircraft was at very high risk of stalling in the finals turn as you turned around to line up on the runway. And a normal finals turn was flown at what we call 27, I'm getting the bar hands out now, so this is turning into a climate. A normal finals turn is flown at 25 degrees angle of bank. At 27 degrees angle of bank, the aircraft would stall and effectively crash into the ground. Now, this is especially hazardous because in a finals turn, because of the speed you're flying at, you're descending at a very great rate. Your closure rate with the ground is quite high, which means that if you were to eject, the aircraft is going down faster than the ejection seat would fire upwards, so you'd effectively still eject into the ground. So you're in a dead man's corner at that point. Now, the difference between, as I say, you fly this turn at 25 degrees angle bank, beyond 27 degrees angle bank, the aircraft would stall. So you've only got a 2-degree angle of bank margin between living and crashing in planes. And this, on this particular sortie, in the last 2 years, they'd had 2 ejections flying in the finals turn. Fortunately, in both cases, the ejection seat had managed to outpace the ground. But, as I say, 2 ejections in 2 years. And I did the statistics on that, and we had about 30 students a year going through the school. So that was effectively a 1 in 30 chance of not coming back from that particular mission. And in basic fighter training, you fly about 100 missions, not as many as dangerous as that, but certainly the statistics don't always paint a pretty picture. And that said, doesn't even remotely compare with what these guys had to put up with in the Second World War. But I think it goes to show that flying training could often be the most dangerous part of a pilot's career. And so even these the chaps who didn't get to fly in combat in World War II certainly had to deal with a high element of risk.
And certainly, I think the bit you were saying about them, turning the boy to the man, because they were, 18-year-olds taking this huge adventure to go out there. I think they'll all say it was the time of their lives. They had a great time out there. But they did come back as men, didn't they?
Can I just chip in with one thing? A little bit of light-heartedness. The RAF, in their wisdom, introduced a scheme by which, if you'd been in the ATC, you were given the new number. Did you know that? So I was one of the first people to benefit from this idea, and I was given the number of 3,142. And on the first parade, when we went to collect our money, you came up and the flight sergeant said, "Number?" And I said 3,142. I don't want to know the of China. He said, "What's your number?" And the lady sitting next to him, who I think was the flight sergeant, said, "That is the number." And that was like a kind of the seaman's albatross. Because in the Air Force, the custom was in those days that you went by the number. If a person had a high number, he'd been in a long while. If he had a low number, he was... I was like this the poem, this thing followed me round. Wherever I went, I was always the first on jankers or getting the cold in or whatever. It was actually extraordinary. But I'd just like to mention this, that going back to Falcon Field, I was tremendously impressed by the fact that the people at that field, at my time anyway, were sort of totally dedicated to turning you out as a pilot. And we had, I think, a large number who didn't make it. But those of us who managed to persist felt we were getting somewhere in an extraordinary way. And I think we should pay a tribute to all those who, in their way, took us through a period of dramatic life, in a sense. As far as I was concerned, it was fantastic. They just wanted us to fly and learn to fly. And so much so that people who I knew in those days still actually contact me on Sunday evening rather. I have people who ring me who were responsible for my training and theirs. I remember one, if you let me tell you one thing, one day my instructor said to me, I should mention, I hope you'll excuse this, that I'm a Christian. He said, Leedham, he said, you see the clouds over, what was the name of the mountain nearby? Yes. I said, yes. He said, well, take us up there. There's some clouds up there. He said, but I'll keep an eye on things. So I said, okay. By this time, I'd realised that he shared my Christian beliefs. So we got up there, and he said, now, all I want you to do is to just let me have the controls, and I'll show you something that not many people have seen. I thought, I wonder what he's on about. And so I sat there thinking, why is he pulling my leg or something? But we had a very good relationship, I should say. And he said, look straight ahead, and with the sun behind us, he said, what can you see? What do you think I could see? Anybody guess? That's a pilot see it.
Were you above the cloud at this point?
No? we could see a complete rainbow that closed in on us. He said, now whereabouts in the Bible is that mentioned, Leedham? Because he was a Christian, I was. I said, I know, in Genesis. I've set my bow in the clouds. I have a grandson who is a captain with Scottish Airways, and he said sometimes if he's flying out to the island and there's nobody aboard, he goes up and does that. Isn't that amazing?
That's a
And
great
my
story,
instructor
Keith.
for the last part of the course was fantastic. And his name is Grady Parrott. And for those of you who have Christian connections, he is the man who founded Missionary Aviation Fellowship. You may have heard of it and you may not, but that's an outfit who seek to support people in various parts of the world. I think they have something like 400 or 500 aircraft now, spread out and helping people and so on and so on. And he is signed, if you look in my logbook, you'll see his signature during the advanced part of the course.
Thank you, Keith. Can I just interrupt? There was a question for, I'm not sure which pilot, but...
Jeff, I'm Wally's son.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, the sort of aircraft that you were training on at Falcon Field really were suited to equipping you to become fighter pilots, weren't they? Although I know quite a lot of pilots from the earlier course